Alrighty. Thanks for joining us, Dylan.
Hey, thanks for having me, Taylor.
Yeah.
This is neat.
Yeah. So we're going to hit on a few different fish, wildlife, and parks topics today. There's some exciting things happening down at Summers Beach State Park. I thought that'd be a good place to start. Can you kind of give us an update on what's going on down there development-wise?
Yeah. Montana's newest state park is Summers Beach. It's on the north shore of Flathead Lake near the town of Summers. It's a beautiful piece of property right there along the lake shore, almost 200 acres. It's a pretty magical place. I've been going there for a long time, ever since I moved to the Flathead from Missoula. And it used to be privately owned, and the private landowners, the Slider family, very generously allowed the public onto that property, but they wanted to protect it permanently into the future. So they approached us at Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we acquired it and made it into a state park. And we went through a really long and pretty comprehensive public process to decide what to do with that property, because it is a special place. A lot of people care about it. We didn't want to do anything that was going to send it in a direction people didn't want. And so we went through a lot of scoping and public commenting, and did surveys, and we did open houses down at the park, and had different alternative options for what to do at the park. And we landed on what is now our final development plan that just came out here recently. And you know, I said we didn't want to send it in a direction that people didn't like, but we also can never please everybody. It's very difficult with these types of projects. We got so much good feedback that was really around across the spectrum of what to do with that Summers Beach State Park property. And so we came to what we think is the best compromise for development at Summers Beach State Park. But I want to acknowledge that some people still don't like what we're going to do out there, and some people love it. But I promise our intentions are in the right place. We're trying to protect that property, and we're trying to strike the balance between recreational opportunity and protecting it in its natural state. And that's not an easy thing to do. Any property that has, wildlife values and conservation value, but also high public interest and appreciation, it can be difficult to kind of balance all that out. And so that's really what we're going to try to do with the development at Summers Beach State Park. What does that look like? So we're going to put in some trail system for non-motorized recreational hiking and biking and wildlife viewing. We're going to pave the parking lot that's there currently. We're going to put in permanent toilets, because obviously that's very important for keeping human waste at a minimum. We're going to put in a hand launch boat launch, so you'll be able to walk a kayak or any boat that you can carry. You can launch on Flathead Lake. We're going to extend the beach. So folks may remember we put in a gravel beach that really was meant to protect the shoreline from erosion, but it also provides pretty cool recreational comfort, hanging out on the small gravel beaches like we have at Volunteer Park and Lakeside. We're going to extend that along a large section of the beach shoreline there, so people have a place they can hang out and enjoy the lake. And then we are going to have very minimal lodging opportunities through cabins. We're going to have a couple cabins down there that you can reserve and stay for a few nights on the far west side of the park, kind of tucked back there in the trees. And so that was out of interest that we'd heard for folks who wanted to have some overnight opportunities down there at Summers Beach as well. So that's all really just in the beginning stages now that we've gone through that public process, collected input, gone through review, and come out with our final decision notice. It's not going to happen overnight, but hopefully here soon we're going to have some of those new amenities down at Summers Beach State Park that will provide those recreational opportunities that people want, but also keep it at a pretty minimally developed state. It's people. I don't think people are going to notice a lot of change down there. We heard loud and clear that people loved it as a pretty rustic, undeveloped property, and we're largely keeping it that way.
Just curious, are there any other state parks around Flathead Lake that have cabins?
Yes, Finley Point, Point down on Flathead Lake. We have some cabins down there, and these cabins really are. Cabin is probably making it sound more fancy than it is. It's essentially a room with beds. There's not bathrooms or anything like that, and there's not even cooking stoves or anything. You got to still do your cooking like you're camping. Basically, it's just essentially a room with a bed. Very rustic and minimal, but it's another unique way that people can have a lodging experience on Flathead Lake, which is pretty unique, and and pretty neat. We've got a variety of lodging opportunities that we try to keep diverse. We've got yurts at Big Arm. We've got tent pads. We've got some state parks like Wayfarers and Big Fork that have a lot of RV sites. We've got hiker-biker sites that are essentially just like little sections set around for just bikers. And now we've got some lodging, little cabins, kind of like almost tiny homes coming to Summers Beach State Park, and just a couple of them.
Oh, that'll be neat.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So the delisting of grizzly bears has been a topic this spring. As I understand it, they're not delisted yet. Can you kind of just give us of where we're at on that in Montana?
Yes. So grizzly bears are federally protected in the lower 48 states under the Endangered Species Act. Montana, the state of Montana, submitted a petition to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that the federal agency that has authority over grizzly bears. We submitted a petition requesting to delist the population of grizzly bears up here in what's called the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. And the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem encompasses Glacier Park, Bob Marshall Wilderness, Blackfeet Indian Reservation, Flathead Indian Reservation, basically from the Canadian border north down to Missoula. And it's a large section of land. It's an ecosystem that was identified years ago when grizzly bears were first listed as a suitable place that grizzly bears could potentially recover. And those recovery efforts, we believe, have worked. We've gone from just a couple hundred grizzly bears left to over 1,100 now in just the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. And so the state of Montana petitioned to delist that population specifically up here in the Northern Continental Divide. There's also a petition that the state of Wyoming submitted for the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is another ecosystem down in and around Yellowstone National Park. The state of Montana supports that petition as well and agrees with it. So those two petitions were submitted, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came out and agreed to review these petitions and essentially give a status review of grizzly bears to say, okay, we've received your request to delist. We're going to take a good hard look to see if it's warranted. And so that's happening right now. The review is underway, and we'll see. The Fish and Wildlife Service inevitably will have the final say on if grizzly bears are delisted. And if the state takes over management of the species, that's what we're looking for. We believe we can responsibly manage grizzly bears in the state of Montana. We've this year released a management plan, a statewide management plan for review, and it was open for 60 days, collecting public comment. And that statewide management plan essentially laid out how we plan to responsibly manage grizzly bears and conserve grizzly bears, address conflicts, improve connectivity between these ecosystems. Essentially, it's our game plan that says, here's what we will do if we get to manage these species. And so we believe we're ready. We already, on a day-to-day basis right now, are really doing a lot of that management work. Our bear specialists and bear managers are out there as we speak, responding to conflicts, working with landowners, improving or sharing education. They're the ones out there doing a lot of the legwork that's required for conservation and recovery of the species. And so we believe we've kind of shown that we can not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And but we'll see. We'll see what the Fish and Wildlife Service says. Until then, they still are a protected species. But we're still always going to be working on conservation, recovery, public safety, reducing conflicts, everything that goes with managing a large carnivore on the landscape. You know, grizzly bears are both valued and feared. For a lot of people, they love and appreciate grizzly bears, and other people deal with property loss and loss of life and threats to their livelihood. And so, again, it goes back to that balance. Our agency constantly is faced with striking a balance. And in this situation, we're striking the balance between public safety and keeping bears wild and conserved. So.
And you said that plan, is that somewhere online? I could link it?
Yes. Well, the final grizzly bear statewide plan is not out yet. It it went out for public comment this winter, 60-day public comment. It was out through the end of February. And so right now it's essentially in the process of our staff is kind of reviewing all the comments. We got lots of comments, as you can imagine, thousands of comments. And so they're reviewing all the comments, reviewing the plan, and then we'll come out with a final plan sometime this year. There's not a lot of rush right now since they're still delisted, but we're trying not to rush through it. Obviously, we want to really be very intentional in how we kind of put that plan out, because if we get management of grizzly bears, obviously we want to do it responsibly and correctly. And so we want to be prepared and dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's before that big day comes.
Is there any kind of other animal that we've delisted that is comparable to the situation that like we've dealt with in the past? Like,
that's a good question. You know, I think wolves are a different type of animal and just their, you know, life history and ecology, but I think you could draw a parallel to wolves were protected under the Endangered Species Act as well. They were delisted through a different process. They were congressionally delisted in Montana, but we similarly back then, we had a citizens group get together to help us come up with a plan on managing wolves and addressing conflicts. That citizen plan led to a statewide conservation management plan that then we used once wolves were delisted to manage the species. And so that's exactly what we did with grizzly bears. The Governor Bullock administration convened a citizens group for grizzly bears to meet and talk through some of these difficult issues. That group came up with recommendations. Those recommendations went into a statewide plan. So similar with wolves, I think grizzly bears is very similar, you know, and we obviously get criticized heavily for our management of wolves, but I would say that under state management, the wolf population has not disappeared. In fact, the wolf population has grown under state management. We have more wolves on the landscape today than we did when we took over management in 2011. So some people would criticize that and say, well, you need to be taking out more wolves, and other people would say you're harvesting too many wolves. And there again, we're striking a balance. We're trying to strike that balance. Conservation needs that balance. And so, I think that would be a similar but different. Yeah. Managing large species, especially large carnivores, is difficult because of the impacts they have. Coexistence is not simple when it comes to a large megafauna, charismatic megafauna, as they say.
So fall is right around the corner. Hunting season is about to be upon us again. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys saw from last hunting season?
Yeah, it's crazy. Summer flies by here in Montana. It's like we're all excited for it, and then it comes and goes in a blink of an eye. But I'm pretty excited about fall. Fall is a great time of year in Montana, and hunting season's a big reason for that. We're anticipating another busy fall of hunting season in Montana. All of the drawings have kind of concluded now in Montana. So the deer and elk permit drawing concluded April 1st. Moose, sheep, goat concluded, and then our bee license drawing just concluded as well. So hopefully everybody out there who put in got their permits and weren't like me and didn't draw anything once again. But we've seen a little bit of a slowdown since COVID. You know, the COVID year was bonkers. It was very busy. Anything outdoors was busy. You know, the trails were busier, the fishing access sites were busier, the ski resorts were busier. I mean, I think, you know, people need habitat just like wildlife need habitat. And in times of stress and, you know, scariness and being locked inside, I think outdoors is really a healthy refuge for people. I know for me, I needed to get outside for my sanity. And so we saw a lot of people go outside during, you know, in the wake of the pandemic. And so our hunting numbers were just through the roof. We had more non-residents applying than ever before. Lots of resident hunters, new hunters, people moving here to Montana. So that was a pretty crazy couple years right after the pandemic. It's kind of subsided now. You know, and that's a nationwide trend. I think nationwide they've seen hunting license sales dip about 3% from the previous year, 2022 over 2021. We've seen a pretty strong interest in non-residents coming up here to hunt, and it's because it's Montana. It's because, you know, you look behind me, this is where people want to come, whether it's Glacier Park or hunting or fishing. We're a destination. The secret's out. But in Montana, there is a cap on the number of non-residents for the big licenses. So for deer and elk combination licenses. So any non-resident who wants to just have a deer and elk license like us residents do, they have to apply for it. And there's a quota of 17,000 of those licenses, for example. So there's a limit. There's a limit on just the deer and elk non-resident licenses as well. So there's a cap on a lot of those really big popular non-resident licenses. Now there are some over-the-counter licenses that non-residents can still purchase. Upland bird license, black bear license, you know, up here in Northwest Montana, we get hunters from across the country coming up here to hunt black bears. It's such a good black bear hunting season up here. And so there are still some over-the-counter opportunities that are not limited, but for the most part, the deer and elk hunting opportunities are limited to those quotas. So that keeps kind of the tidal wave of non-residents, pretty much at bay. That said, we have seen an increasing number of applications for non-resident combo licenses and deer and elk licenses, and we think that will probably continue just because of what we have to offer here in Montana. And so it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. You go to some of these communities in hunting season, and it's their busiest time of year is hunting season because everybody comes through and goes to the little diner and stays at the hotel and goes at the gas station and goes to the cool shops in town. And so hunting is a huge economic boost in Montana. I mean, we are one of the states that has the highest, I think we're the second highest percentage per capita of hunters in our state. About almost 25% of our state are hunters or buy a hunting license, which is way higher than most states. I can't remember the state that beats us. I want to say it's like Hawaii or something.
It's got to be Alaska.
You know what? It probably is Alaska. That's actually a really good guess. I bet you it is Alaska. But we're second, and so it's cool. I mean, hunting culture is strong in Montana. The traditions are strong. It's, like I said, my favorite time of year, so I can't blame non-residents for wanting to come and enjoy what we have just right out our backyard. But we have some of these safeguards, so to speak, that are in place to keep those non-resident numbers from getting out of hand.
Gotcha. And I've heard this is a season-setting year. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up because it's really important for hunters to know that every 2 years we take a good hard look at all of our regulations, the hunting regulations, the season structures, meaning the season length, the hunting opportunities, the type of license you can purchase, the quotas. All of that gets reviewed and up for debate and potential change every 2 years. And we're in that cycle this year. We're starting it a little early. So here at the end of June, actually June 29th in Kalispell is going to be our season setting meeting where our biologists will get up there and kind of go over Region 1, Northwest Montana, and talk about the hunting opportunities we have up here and then ask for feedback saying, okay, hey, does anybody have any grave concerns about the resource? Is there any issues? We did have a pretty rough winter. And our spring surveys, which is when our biologists go out and physically fly or drive around and look and count fawns and deer, and that kind of helps inform what our population monitoring is. It was a rough year, so that could lead to some reduced opportunities if we think that those deer populations are potentially down a little bit or if those elk populations are down a little bit. So those are the conversations we have during these season-setting meetings, and we've got more information. We've got meetings across the state going on over the next few weeks. Like I said, Kalispell, I can look here just to double check. Kalispell's meeting is June 29th at 6 p.m. at our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks office. And then we got meetings in Thompson Falls, June 27th, Eureka, June 28th, and Libby, July 6th. So those are going to be our Northwest Montana meetings. We'll have meetings again in the fall once we kind of get some real firm proposals out for people to look at, meaning literal like changing of quotas potentially or anything that's physical, literal changes. Those will be reviewed and out for comment again. Right now, it's just kind of let's all sit down at a table and talk about hunting in Northwest Montana and what we might have as concerns or possible changes.
Yeah. So you mentioned it is summertime, so everybody's really excited about that. Tons of stuff to do, tons of reasons to get outside. I was just wondering kind of your recommendations for people to enjoy summertime in in the state parks.
Yeah. Well, gosh, it is the best. I've got a few neighbors who've all moved here from other places and they always are kind of ashamed when they talk about being from California or Arizona. I'm like, hey, I can't blame you. I mean, look at where we are. We just went camping for the third weekend in a row, my family and I, and my daughter was out playing in the lake. We were catching crawdads, going fishing. I mean, I cannot blame anybody who wants this type of lifestyle. So I get it. It's, you shouldn't have to be ashamed. As long as everybody's doing it the right way and we're protecting what we've got, then that's a good thing because we want to keep it in good shape. Camping right now, gosh, there's so many good camping opportunities. Unfortunately, it's, we don't have enough opportunities because of all the interest and excitement people have for camping. So finding a campsite can be tricky. There are ones out there, you just got to be a little savvy in finding your reservation, getting your reservation. There's always going to be some first come, first serve opportunities at our campsites. And then sometimes you just got to find that off the beaten path spot where you can go. Our state parks on Flathead Lake are extremely popular. We have very limited numbers of campsites on Flathead Lake. We only have over barely 200 campsites total on Flathead Lake. And gosh, in Apgar at Glacier, don't they have more than 200 just right there? So getting a campsite on some of those prized places like Flathead Lake can be tough. That's why we're always trying to add a little bit more if we can. But it's kind of a wealth of riches right now, even if you can't go camping. I mean, the boating, we've got over 500 named lakes in Northwest Montana. We got the most lakes up here than anywhere else in the state. So the fishing right now, lots of fishing opportunities, lots of places. We were out on a pontoon boat the other night, just driving around Swan Lake, and all of us just looking around and saying, man, this is pretty amazing. This is about as good as it gets. So just getting out on the water, making sure that you got your life jacket so that the game warden's not pulling you over, and checking life jackets in your one or two short, because we really want to make sure that those are on. Those are very important. Luckily the stream flows this year have been, they've slowed down quite a bit. I mean, it might not be a good thing here if it keeps slowing down. I can't believe how quickly we lost our snowpack. So the rivers aren't as dangerous as they usually are early in the summer, but still you want to have that life jacket with you and make sure kids have the life jacket on. Hiking trails, I mean, Lone Pine State Park's about as good as it gets. It's for a state park to be, 5 minutes from downtown Kalispell is pretty special. So, and then there's lots of secret spots that I'm sure everybody has their kind of secret spot that they just love, that's their little refuge. Like we talked about, a place where after a long stressful day or a week where you just need to get out and be by yourself or enjoy some peace and quiet. We've got a lot of those places around here, which we're pretty lucky to have.
I was wondering if you could really quickly go over some like wildlife encounter stuff for the summertime, some safety tips for encountering wildlife.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you definitely want to be safe if you're out there. This is bear country, obviously. So you want to be bear aware, carry bear spray. Bear spray is a very effective deterrent. If you do get into an encounter with a bear, make sure you got it on you close by at your hip or on your chest. It's not going to do you any good if it's in your backpack or in your car when you're out on the trail. So making sure you got your bear spray, check to see if it's expired. You don't want to use the expired stuff, because really what that means is the propellant, the aerosol starts to weaken once it's expired. So you want to make sure you get a good one that's not expired. Keep your bear spray, make some noise on the trail. That way you're not startling a bear. Really the two big reasons bears get into conflict with people is they're defending their young, like a mother protecting her cubs, which is about as dangerous a situation as you can encounter in the wild, or protecting a food source. And so you never really want to threaten a food source. And so oftentimes what happens is a bear's, got its head down, eating on a dead deer or eating some huckleberries, and you come around a corner and you startle it. Well, it kind of reacts like you would if you're sitting there eating your Cheerios in the morning and somebody jumped out at you. You'd kind of swat them. And so that's what bears do. And so you don't ever want to threaten a bear's food source or its young. And you can really do that by making noise, clapping. I mean, you hear people say, "Hey, bear," all the time. That's what we do all the time. And I've yet to have an encounter with a bear that's a bad one. So knock on wood, it just keeps working. Basically, bears don't want to get into any trouble with us, just like we don't want trouble with them. So letting them know you're there. If you do get into an encounter with a bear, you just pull your bear spray out. You kind of group up and you just slowly back away from that situation. You don't want to run. You never run from wildlife like mountain lions or bears. It can trigger that instinct to chase prey. It's like your cat. If you start getting a little fish toy with your cat, it kind of triggers that instinct that go after it. So you don't want to do that with a wildlife. So never run from wildlife. So that's kind of the main ones with bears. Right now we do have a lot of deer and elk that are dropping their fawns. And so that means sometimes they will stow their fawns in kind of weird or inconspicuous places. We had somebody send a picture of a deer fawn that was in their driveway, and they were worried that the deer had been abandoned. It's like, no, that's what those mother deer do. They store them somewhere and then they go off and get food and come back. Putting it in the driveway is maybe not the best place for that deer to put the fawn, but the worst thing you can do is go up and pick it up or disturb it or let your dog off a leash, and that, because those deer are very vulnerable here for a few weeks up until they get up and start moving around. So we've been getting a lot of calls from folks saying, "There's a deer in my yard. Is it okay? It looks like it's been left," and we're like, no, the mom will be back. Just give it some space. basically there should never be a reason you approach wildlife. Down in South Central Montana, it's the bison, situation. The selfie's not worth it. Don't try to get a selfie. Don't try to pet a bison. Same with up here. You don't want to be trying to get your bear selfie and going up and getting a picture of a moose or even deer or anything. You just give wildlife space. They just always need space, and they will give you back the space you need. Yes, unless they're in a really bad mood. That's when you wish. That's when you want to have your bear spray.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything else you want to mention? Coming up?
No, just that we're trying to really emphasize recreate responsibly, which is back to the fact that we've got so many people here who love the outdoors and appreciate these opportunities we have outside, but we want to protect them. And so really it means just some common sense trail etiquette, some leave no trace principles, not throwing garbage out, picking up after your dog, not trashing places. You go to some of these other states and people don't really seem to value their special outdoor places, and you can tell, and it really kind of degrades the experience. And we just don't want to see that happen here in Montana. So we're just trying to ask people to, appreciate what we got, and let's not ruin it for us or the future generations that we have here. So let's keep it pretty special.
Definitely. All right, Dylan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.